Hi everyone, welcome to the new episode 3 already of the Tech and Security Crossing the Divide podcast. As you know, this is a video podcast. I'm still trying to figure this out and keep readjusting my camera and such. So yeah, please bear with me. Today we're joined by Alex Witters, um, who is a head of technology and data protection officer at Shine. As some of you might already know from previous episodes, the ideas of this episode is bring security technology leaders closer together, so we work better together, but also share frustrations that we might have and how we can work better together. Alex, welcome to the podcast.
Hello, yeah, thank you.
Can you do intro for the listeners and tell a bit more about yourself? And like what you do at Shine, what makes it interesting. Feel free to talk about a bit about Shine as well, of course.
Yeah, of course, yeah. I wear many hats actually, but yeah, I am the head of technology, as you said, and the data protection officer, um, which sometimes is quite a two conflicting roles because IT and security has one head, and then you've got to look at it from a data protection. So, it has been an interesting point of view to try and split those kind of activities together to make sure that they are crossing over correctly and I'm not conflicting with myself. Shine is a childcare company slash a coaching company. So we work with primary schools and run activity based activities into the different children from after school club, holiday clubs, and various other sport related things as well. Um, it's never a dull moment. That's what I keep using because it really isn't. Because there's always a lot going on, and a lot of things that are different. And tech is quite a very it's quite important to how the business operates, and so that's where it keeps me entertained and keeps me busy.
Yeah, no, like I said, there's no dull moment. Of course, a red line going to so many conversations these days. It's like AI, AI this, AI that.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to turn it into an AI podcast. But I was wondering, like your personal observation, like what do you see like the opportunities for companies or even non-profits, government organizations? Like where do you think the opportunities are for AI, and also where do you see the risks for AI?
Yeah, I think I'll start with the risks first. I think the risks are. I think there's always going to be risks, regardless of whether you implement things anyway. But I would say it's an exciting thing. I don't think it's at risk if you do it right. I think people are scared about it because they think it's going to take jobs, and quite well it might take some roles, but I don't think it's going to take everything because you still need to train things, and it's not going to. Maybe in many years to come, you might find that it spans out to that, but I don't think it's going to take any jobs anytime soon anyway. But I think there is a lot of exciting opportunities. I think I was, within the business, we're discussing how we're going to use AI and on our website to help the customer journey, but also with data analytics perspectives. So I think there's a different ways of what type of business you are and how you're going to use it. I think if you're an enterprise level, you're probably going to use it much different to how you are if you're an SME. So I think it's just having that split between that. I think you got to be sensible and really investigate whether it's going to be worth it before just not doing the buzzword and going, yeah, I'm just going to do this, it'll be fine. I think that's the problem when people do that and they press the big red button and go, let's do some AI, and then they expose all their data out to everywhere.
Yeah, exactly. And it's a valid point you bring up as well. So, like this, the second episode, the last episode, I should say, I was talking to Wolf Rosiga. He basically runs a consulting firm and in Washington D.C. And he basically said, like organizations need to figure out like in which processes it makes sense to introduce AI, and where the let's say the accelerator is, and where it's basically like a brake pedal, and you go like, well, yeah, don't touch that. Um, I always joke about, like I remember about this. I keep forgetting the airline, and I should write this down. But there was this Canadian airline that also introduced like a customer chatbot, and then basically somebody talked to the chatbot, and because they were not doing like quality evaluation monitoring on the LLM on the chatbot, basically somebody managed to convince the chatbot that there should be a refund due because basically the person wasn't able to make the flight, even though there was no refund in place. The person talked to the chatbot so long that the chatbot then actually authorized the refund, and then quite substantial refund, which was quite interesting. So I know some organizations even went like the other way in, went like they went like, oh yeah, we don't want full AI for customer service chatbot because yeah, that's then we get something like this. Um, but yeah, it's very much interesting to see, and because we're both in UK as well, it's like how do you see like like UK versus like let's say the US? Of course, let's be honest, like US in lots of things are leading, going quicker. But also I'm also seeing some things where UK/Europe is catching up. Like what do you see like a difference in experience when it comes to how companies and organizations are approaching AI? Because I've been having some very interesting conversations, but I was wondering as well if you what you're seeing on the ground.
Yeah, I mean, I would say UK is heightening up. I think AI, especially with the investment that the government want to do with these AI data centers and things like that. So I'd say that's a positive traction on that AI is going the right way in the UK, which I think is good for us as a country. But
Hmm.
like you said, the US go over and about for everything, and
Hmm.
quite rightly, sometimes we're we're right behind. So I think it is good that we are seeing that positive traction, and people are talking about it more. Not,
Yeah.
I think for a while I did think it was more people were just on it because of the buzzword it's AI and let's talk about it. But I do
Hmm.
feel now is starting to people are starting to think actually this could really benefit us rather than it being a rather than being just a oh that'd be cool to say we have an AI tool. And I think
Yes.
that
Yeah.
comes
Yeah.
from not just technical people. I think that's coming from like leadership people that I've spoken to, like either within the organisation I work for or outside of things that else I do with my volunteering and things like that. I think there is that kind of going, we need to be a leader in this, or we need to stand out. So we need to
Hmm.
not be falling behind and keep up to date with it. And I think that
Yeah.
message is getting around the UK, not
Hmm.
just, certain areas or things like that. I think it is starting to, kind of come together, I think, really.
Yes. Yeah. And like I said, we like I said, the AI strategy, which is a good thing. But also movements like responsible AI, which is good. Like not just going throwing AI at everything and then breaking down everything, but finding a responsible way of doing it. But also like we have organizations like Anthropic, like we got Mistral, we got DeepSeek, and yes, I know lots of people have different opinions, but I like having choices, so I'm all for it. I'm not saying put all your sensitive data in there, but not a lawyer here, just to be clear. uh, not providing legal advice, but yeah, no, it's very interesting, and yeah, lots of opportunities. I think. Um, I was wondering as well, like you mentioned already, when you did the intro, when you go like, well, sometimes the data protection bit clashes with the technology bit. Like how do you see like like the next few years, considering like there's lots of people continuing to push like free tools, and then basically in the free tool you end up being the project, and balancing that with the privacy requirements that we do have at this side of the pond. Like how do you see that like moving about, like do you see like the EU for instance, like going like, well, if you don't do this then you can't operate this. So like for instance, like this set with AI, you can't operate certain functionality because you're not compliant. Do you see that like improving, or do you see that getting worse, or
I think it needs to be in place, especially in the industries like where I am. Been in the childcare industry and that
yeah.
education in general. is all, is just as good as, is just as high and heightened as the NHS. So I think there needs to be guidelines, and obviously you can't, if people make their own AI learning models, then obviously you can't really control that, because you don't, unless you're in that business, there's not a lot you can do on that. But with these companies, OpenAI or Google's and their Gemini and all those kind of things, they need to make sure that those processes are being covered, because otherwise data is going to get out. And that's why I think sometimes you've got teachers that are quite concerned about the safeguarding. If we talk from a childcare and education kind of perspective, is that they are concerned what information is it going to present. So I think you have to have those safeguards, just as social media is. I think some people will say that they don't like that and they'd rather it, if we're using tech, why can't we do everything that we want to? And I think there is a reason that they have got a fair point in some shape or form. But if you're a public product that can be used by anybody in the public who can sign up to it, you've got to have that control. Whereas if you're making your own language models and you're making your own machine learning models, then that's in your control. You choose who's going on it and who's accessing it. That's at your risk if you open it up to someone who might see information that they shouldn't. Whereas these, the bigger tech companies that are doing these models and allowing us to use it on a, sign up with an email and off you go, you've got it, or even turn it on your Windows laptop. Here you go, here it is. You've got to have those guards to protect what might, what might come around the corner.
Yeah, and that's my only observation as well. And I go like, how far should these providers go? Like for instance, now should they go like, hey, we can see that you're logging in from like a school or something. Should they, for instance, should we force that they implement guardrails by default, where, for instance, it doesn't allow you to input certain data because it goes, hey, you're a public education institution. Guess what? You can't ask this question because you're basically trying to ask a sensitive question to begin with. And this is where, of course I go like, some people call it like nanny state or whatever, and go like, how far should you go? But yeah, I do worry about it. I'm a parent myself. I got 2 daughters. I got a funny question today. Basically, my kids were like, they had like open day, show their work at school. And then they were talking about blackboards, and this was quite funny. And I felt all of a sudden very old as well. But basically, they're like, it's classroom in the past and classroom now. And it's like a classroom in the past. One of the things they wrote down was blackboard, and I was like, oh crap, yes, we had blackboards. We didn't have smart boards and all of that jazz. And don't get me wrong, I like it. Like there's lots of more interactive things you could do with it. But then I also thought, it can go also the other way, because you inadvertently might share data or show data. Well, in the past you couldn't, because let's be honest, it was a blackboard. There could be no data leakage inbound or outbound, if you will, unless you had like a marker. Nothing just randomly appeared. Well, with the smart board, like I do worry about the vulnerability of those. I know, like in the past, I forgot what it was, but there was a vendor that had the vulnerability as well. And then basically some of those smart boards ended up showing on Shodan. And then you just go like, well, okay, that's asking for trouble. But yeah, maybe I'm slightly paranoid. But yeah.
Well, it's understandable.
Yeah.
I think is important in terms of to have that, because otherwise, if you didn't, you would never be cautious about anything. And I think it is always good to be cautious. I think we're going back to your comment about, how far do you go with AI locking down? I think the problem is if you lock it down to the school, all they're going to do is go home and do it. I was at this conference.
Yes.
I was at this conference once where they had a load of teachers there, and they had someone from Microsoft, and they were talking about Copilot. This is like when it was sort of just starting out with Copilot, and he was talking about how kids are going to use it. They're going to use it for their coursework. So you've got to change your way of teaching. And this teacher was like, we don't want them cheating. And it's like, well, you've then got to teach your way in a different way. So he was using an example is that if you've asked them to write an essay about Henry VIII, then when they come in, you quiz them on that rather than than just going, well, you've used AI. Because if they answer your questions, they've learned something. They have used it as a learning tool. If they've just gone copy and paste it, close, save, off we go, then they haven't learned things. Whereas it can be used in the right way. But if you say no, all they're going to do is do it the more.
Yeah, and this is a discussion I have, and to be honest, I'm not going to claim it's my quote. It's something that I heard Ashish Rayan said in his LinkedIn post and the podcast, I think as well. And he talked about as security, we basically kind of like failed when cloud came along. As then people started using cloud. We already back then complained about shadow IT and people putting like workstations on their desk. Then when it came to clouds, we kind of like missed it because we were department of no in general. Um, and then he made a very good point. He said, like if you thought shadow IT was bad or shadow clouds, think about shadow AI. That's like multiple levels of nightmare. Um, so he put like a public challenge on LinkedIn. It was like, hey, you know what? As security leaders, we all have an opportunity now to lead. But if we miss this one, then we're not gonna, mark it back to my podcast. We're not gonna cross this divide anymore. It's gonna be a good divide that is gonna be so big that we're not gonna be in the same room anymore. Because businesses will need to do AI, and then if we don't give them something that workable, yeah, they will just skip security.
Yeah,
And
I
then,
think
like
that's
you said, then you might have a situation like you said, with schools. They go like, well, oh, the controls are too much at schools, and then the kids at school at home are just going to do something even much worse.
definitely.
And let's be honest, this especially in this day and age, most parents are both working very long hours.
Yeah.
I'm not saying it goes back to latchkey generation. That was my generation, you left the key and you walked home yourself and all of that stuff. But we do need to be mindful, and it's something that I know. I call myself like an AI enthusiast. I'm not going to call myself a like AI expert, but it's do something that I worry about. With OWASP and such, good things are being done. Um, but I sometimes do go like, well, I wish I didn't have to work and just focus on this because I think there's so much to be done there.
There's a lot of education that needs to
Yeah,
happen, I think. Not,
yeah,
obviously from a parent point of view, from a teacher point of view, but even from a business point of view. And I think that's where
yeah,
those policies, procedures, those risks come in. Someone asked me the other day, like, have I changed any policies or to reflect the AI, introduction of AI? And I said, some
yeah,
elements, yes, but some elements, there is just a dedicated AI policy that I've written to put in place, because whilst you might get some people in the business may never want to use it or never use it at all ever,
yeah,
but
yeah,
you've got to be ready for those moments where someone goes, do you know what, I'm going to use Copilot or I'm going to use ChatGPT to write this,
yeah,
write
yeah,
this email or write this document, and you've got to be ready for those kind of things, especially like for me, from both hats, looking at where is our data going, whether they put any data, sensitive data or not, there's still data.
yeah,
And that's where that education comes around. And it's quite hard to educate people that see it as a fun tool.
yeah,
And I'm talking about like in general, not just like people like, the work with. I think because it is quite a buzz.
yeah,
Logging into, like we use Copilot example, logging into Microsoft Word and getting it to say, can you generate this document from another file or
yeah,
summarize these things? It's a really buzz and cool thing, but to
yeah,
educate the risk behind that is,
yeah,
it's a bit like when a children goes into a play park and you say, don't climb on that because you're going to get hurt. It's a very similar situation where be careful with it. Whilst it is fun and you'll enjoy yourself, but you might get
yeah.
hurt as well in that sense. It's the same principles.
Yeah, and again, a similar example to that is that, of course, don't get me wrong, the providers are getting better, but there's lots of discussion like, hey, if any data I put in, you're going to use for your model, where then it gets tricky is that people then also have been using it to write storybooks for the children. And then, it's one thing putting in like names, which already can be identifying technically, because if your child has a very specific name, it
Mm.
kind of like stands out. Um, but then, unfortunately, like I don't know if you've seen this once, but you had these personalized books, which you had before AI, and basically you could say, like this is the kind of book, and then give me
Mm.
your name and whatever and birth date, and then we'll send you a personalized book. The cool part with ChatGPT and all of those things, you can do those things as well and get it to write the book, and then you go like, well, actually, the problem now is that if your data is then being used to perform the model, then potentially the data you put in then can come back. And then, if, for instance, if you put in, for instance, one of those original books, you also put the address in, and then
Mm.
of course they had the NDA, and it would be perfectly fine because it wouldn't get out and such. But if you do an AI model, and depending on which one you use, you might in a situation that hey, you just gave the model your child's names and address because you're trying to replicate that,
Yeah.
and yeah, good luck trying to get that out.
I
So
think that's
this,
where
yeah,
there's a lot of education for IT professionals. There just
yeah,
isn't a lot of education for non-technical people who might want to
yeah,
use it. And I think that's
yeah,
where it becomes quite. I think that's where it becomes more scary for me
yeah,
as that leader of tech. Going,
yeah,
if they don't know, what are they doing? Because you can't watch them every single day. If they set up an
no,
account with
no,
ChatGPT, I have no control over what they put. I can teach them and tell them what they
yeah,
should and shouldn't do. And
yeah,
likewise, I could post on LinkedIn going, you should do these top tips or whatever. But unless you actually see them doing it, there's no way to know, is there really? Unless you keep it
no, no,
unless you say no. And I think even if like with
no.
schools, you stop students doing it. If you can't stop any adult doing it. If they want to do it, they're going to use it.
Exactly, exactly. And I always give this other example from an abstract perspective. People always go like, what code, what's written, and go like, yeah, you have coding tools to check if the code is secure, but the only thing that works, that if you want to see everything, is peer review. But peer review of code is not going to work at that scale, because you can't be at in front of 200 developers, because like, I had this discussion before, with an organization in the past, which I should not name, to protect them, obviously. And they were like, okay, we want somebody to do application security / DevSecOps, and we want you to basically walk over to developers. Literally went like, yeah, we got an extra chair, and then like move around the room. It's like, okay, but how would that work? There's 60 developers in the room, and there would be one person. Uh, I'm literally a bottleneck. It's like it's not even it's not agile. It's not even waterfall. Like I don't even have a name for that, because basically, effectively, at any point of time, there's 59 developers just blocked, and it's like, yeah, that doesn't work. So we had a conversation as well, like, how would it work? And it's like, well, okay, so at this scale, yeah, maybe like 10 people. And then I had an organization and was like, yeah, okay, we want to do, they also want to do something similar. And it's like, okay, are you going to give me budget to hire 30 AppSec engineers? And then they're like, okay, what's the average remuneration for an AppSec engineer? It's like, oh yeah, this is the amount. And they're like, yeah, that's not going to work. I was like, that's what I told you. um, and also, you end up becoming the department of no again. So yeah, this is also with AI, where hey, we can't sit behind every screen and trying to figure out what they do. It's not scalable. Um, so yeah, it's things that do keep me up at night. I know there's quite a few AI security vendors, startups that are now coming up, um, but it's such a early stage field, that's yeah, I don't know. My hope is that matures a bit, because we need some uh, tools to do this at scale, basically,
Yeah, yeah. I
because
think
otherwise we're gonna miss out on stuff.
definitely, definitely. I think for me, I'm obviously you put a lot of trust in the people that are using it, and I don't want to
Mm.
discourage people from using it because there is benefits to them. And I think
Yeah,
that's where until such a time there is more monitoring that if someone sets up a chat GPT in the workplace with their personal account, with their like
mm.
email that is a work related email, that you don't
Yeah,
suddenly it like blocks it and those kind of. I think there is
yeah,
until that time that those kind of things come in, I think it has to be relying on trust and education,
Yeah,
because otherwise they're going to use it and you don't have the control. At least if you educate, if there is anything that ever goes wrong, you can say from, in our policies, we said we're going to educate people. And I know that this perspective, I need to do more training towards the staff, because yes, I have conversations with people, but necessarily it's not always something that is as a training and the importance. I stand there and we talked about data protection, and we've done, we talk about cybersecurity awareness and those kind of things, but actually AI is really used in a topical conversation. It's not actually as a in-depth training. And I think that, and I'm probably not the only head of tech around that's doing the same thing, where they
yeah,
haven't really done it enough because they're trusting people to just to carry on with it. And I think,
yeah,
that's a continuous lesson for me, is to make sure that we are having the right training to everybody, including myself, having the right training to make sure that I know the risks of what it is. You can spot the obvious because you work in IT all the time. You can spot those things, but
yeah,
sometimes actually knowing the risks that are out there that could happen, more for either using off-the-shelf products, less than if you're building it yourself. I think that's where there does need to be that level of, I think there's two levels of training. I think there's the level of training for the IT professional to spot those kind of, what are the risks there, and what are these could be mitigated, or what can you do to educate yourself. And then there's that education of those, standard users that are
yeah,
just
yeah.
creating accounts and things like that.
Exactly. Like, what does responsible use look like?
Yeah,
Like do's or
yeah,
don'ts, and make it straightforward. Like, hey, don't put a social security number, or don't put your national insurance number in.
yeah,
You know,
yeah,
if you're using it to craft a reply to a client, replace the client name and say, client name X.
yeah.
So yeah, but please don't feed the machine, because between you and me, yes, there's terms and conditions, but I don't always trust these vendors to stick to terms and conditions,
Mhm.
because this is one of the, I guess, the things that I worry about is, they might go like, yeah, we're not using your data for ingesting training the model, but they might go like, yeah, we use it for telemetry purposes. And it's like, okay, what does telemetry purposes look like? Is that, oh, you're also asking this query that other people are asking, so I'm going to suggest this query to other people that are also asking this question, and therefore then revealing something that you didn't want
Mm,
revealed, that kind of thing.
definitely.
Um, so yeah, this is like one of the things that I worry about. Um, what does excite me is like the AI coding. I know some people like to joke about it, call it now vibe coding, where you get non coders using something like Cursor or such, and then Creo AI or whatever, and then building something, and then not necessarily understanding the code, it kind of does something. Um, that's the scary
I
part.
can safely say
Uh,
I've done something like that. Not to that level,
uh,
but it's kind
uh,
of
uh,
like, oh, you want to do something in HTML or something.
uh,
Because
uh,
I'm not a coder,
uh,
I'm in like infrastructure
uh,
and solutions. So
uh, uh,
doing those kind of things, using that for that then, or building something in Power Apps and you want it to have changed the code for this, and all that
yeah.
kind of stuff. It saves time sometimes than Googling it.
Yeah, no, that's true. What is interesting for me is that the whole agentic AI, and I know it's a bit of a buzzword, but basically I'm involved in some like volunteer initiatives as well, and yeah, really crazy things being built. There's this guy on LinkedIn as well, Reuven Cohen, and he basically like built something today, and with like just a few lines of commands here, basically like he launched like 500 agents going off doing things, partially building an application, partially doing web research, then another one having a role of like validating the research the result that comes back, does that look right? Correcting it. There's so much possible, and I guess this is the exciting bit for me as well.
Mm.
Not to put like a VC hat on, but like the one person, $1 billion unicorn, as in, because AI makes it so much easier that we might end up in the future with some 1 or 2 person companies that are literally doing have a $1 billion evaluation because it's just
Oh
2
yeah,
billion
I
people
definitely can
that
see it happening.
yeah. So that's going to be interesting. Then I always have one question that I always finish with. And I also did the same in my previous podcast, to be honest. If you had a magic wand, what do you want to change or make happen?
I think I'd like to duplicate myself, really. Until such a time I can have an AI bot to doing some of my stuff or being in the same places at once. That would
Yeah,
be really useful. Like mostly to like
yeah,
maybe go to, because I do a lot of volunteering as well as doing
yeah,
my actual very busy day job. So having like
yeah.
multiple of me to go off and do plenty of other things, keep making the impact that I like doing. So yeah, that would be that.
Yes. So basically, Alex bot. Yeah,
Yeah,
that would be
yeah,
good.
yeah.
Yeah. Which is funny as well. Like you think about it, like um, again, like I just you read the most random articles sometimes when it comes to AI, but AI robotics is getting also like really good. So there's now this company in China, and yes, I know some people go like China, oh, but now they built like a robot that you can get to do certain functions, and literally I think it starts at like $11,000, which is like a very low price point. Of course, you don't get like a human looking robot or something, just to be clear. It's obviously a robot. But it's crazy, like how, in the past, let's be honest, like we were looking at, I forgot what's the memory company now, Boston Robotics, was it? Yeah. I maybe get the name wrong. But basically, they were building robots, and it's like, yeah, well, technically, if somebody wants to buy this, yeah, we can buy it, and it would be like 500,000 or something crazy. And now you got these companies like literally churning out robots for, and you go like the cost price. It's like it's $11,000. Um, so my personal thing, what I would like is like like a butler. That would be nice. Um, even if it's like simple task or like maybe I know I already got a dishwasher and I shouldn't say load the dishwasher, um, but I don't know. I think that there could be like value in there. But again, I'm thinking of the positive. I'm not trying to think of the negatives.
No,
I'm
no,
saying
no.
like how do you scare the robot and whatever. But yeah,
It's
interesting.
removing that
Yeah.
mundane task, isn't it? Letting them do
Yes. Yeah.
so you focus on the things you enjoy and let them do the the
And I
boring
think
tasks.
exactly, and I think that should be the whole goal of all of AI. To be honest, not just just for replace humans. No, let them do the boring tasks so we can do all the creative stuff,
Yeah,
and
exactly. Yeah.
um, you can do more volunteering, all of that jazz, and that be nice.
Mm.
And we can only hope for that. I have
Yeah,
to
one day.
be positive. Yes, one day we'll get there. But yeah, thank you for your time. I know it's challenging to find time. We're all busy, but I enjoyed the conversation. I hope you enjoyed it as well.
Yeah, I did. Yeah.
Um, and then for the people watching at home or listening over a podcast, thank you for joining for another episode. I will be back soon for episode number 4. But yeah, hope you enjoyed it. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out. Thank you.